Welcome back to Leading Edge. I'm Dan Cummins. We're going to talk with John Mangas. He's with the Ohio Realtors, the president of the state. There's so many questions to ask you. But first of all, the news this week was that interest rates hit 7%. Now, if you're old enough, as an adult in the 70s, 80s, you remember when interest rates were like double digits, and maybe we're heading that way. We sure hope not. But compare how things have been. Like every day's Christmas, you're selling homes like crazy, and now things are slowing down.
So you make a great point. We did have some really unpleasant interest rates in the 80s and early 90s. But what we're seeing now is really a more normal rate, Dan. What we're seeing now is really typical of the industry. We all just got spoiled over the last few years. We took it for granted.
You did, I think the consumer did, all the free money for the loans, the 2.5%, 3.5% loans. I don't know if we'll ever see that again in our lifetime.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, probably not. But what's important to remember is the mortgage interest deduction is still there. I think when interest rates were in the high 2s to mid 3s, people didn't really think about the mortgage deductibility on their interest. And today, that number matters again, Dan.
That's a great point. So with RE/MAX, how many homes were you able to sell typically during a month versus how things have tapered off now?
Sure.
Of course, when things were good last year, inventory was kind of a problem too, because homes would go as soon as they come out on the market.
Exactly. Inventory has come up a little bit. There are a few more homes on the market than there were, but we still are challenged with the market slowing and contracting a bit. What that really means is that there is more opportunities for first-time buyers, especially first-time buyers, because there's not as much demand. So for instance, September of last year, we sold just over 200 houses, like 213 houses, and September of this year, we were in the 180s. So we were off a bit. The market has contracted a bit, interest rates have gone up a bit, but there's still opportunity there for buyers. One of the sayings that's a little cliche, but you date the rate and you marry the house. You can always refinance to a lower rate later.
I would think it would be more difficult to break into buying a home right now, to start from scratch, because you don't have any home equity to cash in to lower the burden somewhat. Because a lot of us that have homes, you've got some equity in a home. Right. If you jump to another place, but you're jumping in. But still, it's better than. Rent is throwing money away pretty much, isn't it?
Well, think of it this way. Rent is 100% interest, right?
Yep.
I mean, you're not ever getting a return back on the rent that you pay. And if you look at what inflation has done to rent, not just in Toledo, but around the country, rents have really, really outpaced inflation. So when you look at rent, that really isn't a great long-term strategy. Home buying is still a better strategy overall.
Even with the interest rates as high as they are.
Yes, because you still benefit from the appreciation. People talk about us being in a recession, perhaps, but one of the key indicators with most recessions is that property values drop. And we're still seeing incremental appreciation. Not like we were in the spring or last year, but we're still seeing properties increasing in values. So that's an indication that maybe we aren't in a recession, we're just going through an inflationary period.
When a home would go on the market, it would be on the market for how many days versus how things have progressed to now? I mean, I heard stories where, maybe from you, where a house goes on the market and as soon as it's on the market, it's got like 3 offers
or 30 offers, Dan.
And each offer has to keep going. So maybe you're asking $250, the first offer is $270, $280, $290.
Yeah, so we went through this era where escalation clauses were part of the norm. The problem with escalation clauses is at the end of the day, most people are getting financing and the property still has to appraise. So, escalation clauses were a great way to drive those prices up. But, think of it this way. When you've got a property that has 16, 18, 25 offers on it, and you've got 5 or 6 or 7 of those that have escalation clauses, where do you start the floor at? You know what I mean? So when you go to an auction, the auctioneer starts a minimum bid, right? But with the escalation clause, that never really happened. So it became really problematic. And then ultimately, the property still has to appraise.
What's your advice for a first-time prospective home buyer to get your financing ahead of time? And with the high interest rates, is money tighter than it was a year ago?
So there is money to lend. Local lenders are the way to go. Talk to your local lender. Talk to a favorite local lender. call me, call my office. We'll recommend some local lenders because they know the market. They know the local market. They know what the inventory is like, and they can help that buyer position themselves. Make sure that the credit's cleaned up. Make sure that maybe if there's some short-term debt that needs paid down, cleaning up some credit card debt, or if you're a millennial, maybe you've got some credit card payment on time issues from the college days, Dan. All of those things matter because the cleaner that file becomes, the lower the interest rate, the lower the closing costs, the better the transaction is for that buyer.
So from your perspective, business as a realtor is still pretty good. It just isn't as good as last year, which was just off the charts.
Correct.
Historically unusual.
Historically unusual. Last year was frankly an anomaly. I mean, it happens from time to time.
And it wasn't going to last forever, John.
Kind of like Hurricane Ian. It was an anomaly. That market that we had was really an anomaly. But what we have now is a more balanced market. We're seeing opportunity for buyers. We're still seeing sellers getting a good number for their property. Yes, rates are higher, but there's still opportunity in the market.
Is the amount of inventory still manageable for you to be able to sell a home?
It is, and the good thing is we're seeing inventory coming up a bit, so there is opportunity for first-time buyers in the fall market that they didn't have in the spring market because there was just so much demand in that spring market. Speaking of market, let me go to supply and demand for a minute. Baby boomers have a home ownership rate of around 78%. Gen Xers have a home ownership rate of around 67%. If we look at the largest of the demographics, the millennials, they're still under 40% homeowners. So there's still a big gap there to be filled. And I don't think we can lose sight of that, Dan.
All right, John Mangas, thanks so much for coming
My pleasure.
in today on Leading Edge. Give us an idea of the real estate market. We'll be right back with more right after this.